In the previous video, we talked about the anthropological approach, and we talked about 5 aspects of anthropology that we can use to help us better understand culture and worldview. And the point of all this is to help us all to become culturally fluent as well as gain intercultural competency, especially when it comes to people or places or cultures that are different from our own. So in this video, we'll talk about how we might be able to apply some of these anthropological aspects to the Bible, and also maybe how we can observe something that's in the Bible. Now, here are 8 topics that I've come up with. So first topic is better Bible reading. Second topic is beware of anti-Judaism. Third topic is reading what Jesus and his disciples may have read at that time. Fourth, learning about the actual cultural values that are in the Hebrew Bible. Fifth is making room for other cultures to interpret scripture and to interpret different parts of scripture. 6, being aware of and being okay with language ambiguity and how language is translated. 7 is recognizing that much of the Hebrew Bible can be better understood through the lens of a Bedouin culture. And finally, 8 is talking about rituals and how we need to be mindful of them and to not dismiss them. Now, the third topic with relating anthropology and the Bible together is this idea that between the Hebrew Bible, between Genesis to Malachi, there's a 400-year gap until the time of Jesus. There's a German scholar named Matthias Hansa who wrote about this in a short but clear message that we need to take seriously the literature that Jesus and his disciples and the people of that culture read, because it influenced their culture, it influenced their worldview, and it influenced how they interpreted who Jesus was and what Jesus was doing. Now, we may be reading the New Testament in light of the Hebrew Bible, which is very good, and we're also reading the New Testament in light of our own cultural worldview, which is good too. But we can't ignore the fact that there's literature that have influenced the worldview of Jesus' time that were written and that are now called either the pseudepigrapha or the apocrypha, and many of those are actually helpful for us to gain a better understanding of what some of the writers of the New Testament were writing about. So Matthias Hansa writes about several things that made a cultural gap between the writings of the Hebrew Bible until Jesus' time. So for example, in the Hebrew Bible, there's very little to no mention of demons, and yet when we come to the New Testament, demons abound. That Jesus goes to the Gerasene region of Galilee and he has to take out the spirit that's in this person and put it into pigs. And how did the worldview jump from no to little talk about demons to demons actually controlling or possessing people? What is up with that? Well, part of it has to deal with some of the writings in the pseudepigrapha. Now, pseudepigrapha means false writing. Now, it doesn't mean that whatever's written is false, but the authors take upon a name of someone famous from the past and uses that name as the title. So they're not necessarily the writers of this work, but they use the name of someone in the past, namely Enoch, who was the only one that did not die in Genesis. And so he used Enoch as a basis to write about the fallen angels. Genesis gives us an account of how the fall of human beings, but it's very minute in its description of how the spiritual beings also fell. Now, Enoch, in his or their interpretation of what happened in Genesis 6, of the talk about the Nephilim or the giants, and how spiritual beings mixed with human beings, and that was not part of the creational purpose. But the particular thing that Enoch highlights is that these spiritual beings actually are behind a lot of the evil that's around that time in the 400 years of war and violence, of witchcraft and abominable practices of human sacrifices and things like that. And so that gave rise to the mindset that behind the evil that people do, there might be some other influences and factors that could be the result of spiritual beings. And the second pseudepigrapha that I read during the beginning of COVID was the Book of Jubilees. And the Book of Jubilees is actually a retelling of the story of the Book of Genesis. And it talks about it from the point of view of Moses writing from the mountain in Exodus and goes back and forth between the two. But really it's talking about Genesis as a whole. Now what's striking about the Book of Jubilees is those who wrote it and those who read it had a particular emphasis on dates, on how dates are important in as much as genealogies are important. Whereas Genesis, there's very little dates involved, or very little dates that are cited. But when you get to the Book of Jubilees, almost every story, there is a particular date that this happened in this time, this Jubilee. And for some reason, that was important to them. Now this gets us back to the idea of, yeah, this fact or this observation may or may not be important, but let's keep it, and it might be important at some point in the future. It's this idea of critical realism, that maybe what we've observed is only a provisional observation, that we need to interpret this now in light of all the other things. So the pseudepigrapha, we hopefully will not read it on our own or by ourselves and take it as gospel truth, quote unquote, but maybe we need some help. So the example of the book by Matthias Hansa, Mind the Gap, can be a good starter, and that could lead you into reading about the pseudepigrapha a little bit more.